All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Ben Horn, and I decided to do my project on the history of rock music and what I think it means to basically America. I'm going to be looking at the 60-year period of the 1950s to the 2010s and where I think rock has come over that time. So the story starts in July of 1959 with the release of Chuck Berry's On Top featuring Johnny B. Goode. This album and song revolutionized the music industry, bringing funk and electric guitar into the industry. The song went on to become a smash hit of Chuck Berry's, later being covered by Judas Priest and, of course, parodied in Back to the Future. After his initial contribution in 1960, the Beatles would, after Chuck Berry's initial contribution in 1950, the Beatles would start in 1960, or 1963, but in the 1960s. Over their career, they managed to release 13 studio albums, and they only had a 7-year recording career, so that's pretty amazing. Now, moving into the 70s and 80s, we see the emergence of hard rock. Now, hard rock is what most people think of when they hear the words rock and roll, and most of the famous rock bands started during this time period. That would be including, but not limited to, Guns N' Roses, Aerosmith, AC/DC, and Van Halen, with their lead guitarist, Eddie Van Halen. Eddie Van Halen's fast, loud guitar playing defined rock music throughout the 80s. Now, moving into the 90s, people were ready for a new, innovative subgenre of rock music. That genre emerged and defined itself as grunge. Grunge music was defined by depressive vocals and a dirty, angry sound. There were many bands that were part of this movement, but the most popular by far was a band named Nirvana. Nirvana was a band consisting of 3 members: bassist Chris Novoselic, drummer Dave Grohl, and guitarist, singer-songwriter Kurt Cobain. Nirvana's career started in 1989 with the release of Bleach. Their second album, Nevermind, in 1991, is what brought them most of their success. It was instantly regarded as a classic album and still is to this day, obviously. Their third album, In Utero, in 1993, is also regarded as a classic. Now, it seemed that Nirvana was unstoppable almost, and them and other bands like Soundgarden and Pearl Jam were seeming to make grunge new and exciting, but the success was not to last. Nirvana was disbanded in 1994 due to the suicide of Kurt Cobain, arguably the man behind the genius of Nirvana's music. He was born on February 20th, 1967 in Aberdeen, Washington. He died on April 5th, 1994 in Seattle, Washington. Without Kurt Cobain, there could be no more Nirvana. This tore apart the grunge community, for the band's recording cycle had been cut short. This broke the system of innovation in rock and roll. The band that had been chosen to lead the decade through the new genre was no more. Kurt Cobain's work was unfinished. This caused a break in the basic timeline of rock and roll. It started with Chuck Berry, moving on to the Beatles. The 70s were defined by bands like Led Zeppelin, Aerosmith, and AC/DC. The 80s were ruled by Van Halen, but Nirvana only lasted until 1994. After the disbandment of Nirvana, drummer Dave Grohl tried to start the Foo Fighters as a frontman. He tried to use his experience in Nirvana to fuel the Foo Fighters and keep the grunge movement alive. However, he, along with other bands like Soundgarden, were not able to keep the movement going. This led to the innovation of a new genre called emo. Emo had the depressive vocals of grunge, but without the angry sound or creativity. Two of the most prominent emo bands are Evanescence and Panic at the Disco. It can be noted that Evanescence was formed only a year after the death of Kurt Cobain. The rise of this new genre is the cause of the fall for rock and roll. The genre of emo was quickly frowned upon by many, attracting mainly young, troubled tweens and teens for its fans. But this is still the defining subgenre of rock music to this day, and rock music is defined by the most popular subgenre of the time. This unfavorable opinion caused the decline of the genre, and that is what I believe to be the story of rock music. Thank you for listening.